November 5, 2025, Puerto Cabello, Venezuela, 4:36 a.m. The harbor lay buried under pre-dawn darkness, the kind that turns the sea into a sheet of black glass. 4 Venezuelan Navy patrol boats slipped out of port without a single radio transmission, their silhouettes barely visible against the coastline. Engines rumbled low, muffled under layers of steel and salt. Each boat carried 12.7mm heavy machine guns and aging Soviet 73mm launchers. Weapons kept alive more by habit than modern maintenance. The crews believed they were heading out to confront a single American destroyer, a manageable threat, a political message, a controlled escalation. What none of them realized was that their briefings were built on old intelligence. Their target wasn't a lone destroyer. It wasn't even close. It was the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, a floating city with nearly 70 aircraft aboard. And it wasn't alone. A full strike group sailed with her, silent but ready. By 5:21 a.m., inside the Eisenhower's Combat Direction Center, radar operators detected faint, fast-moving echoes coming from the south small signatures. Tight formation. Definitely not commercial. The captain didn't hesitate. Let's light them up. Moments later, the USS Gravely and USS Mason surged ahead, forming a protective wedge around the carrier. Crews manned their stations. Gun crews waited. The ocean seemed to hold its breath. The Venezuelan lead boat, Equivocada 23, pushed its engines to 40 knots. Its captain believed he was closing in on a single American destroyer. His radar operator never questioned the massive radar signature looming behind the smaller one. He didn't recognize the unmistakable mark of an aircraft carrier. At 5:48 a.m., the Venezuelan boats finally broke radio silence. Their transmission crackled through static. "You are entering Bolivarian waters, alter course immediately." The Eisenhower didn't respond. Minutes later, the patrol boats reached visual range and went silent. Rising out of the horizon wasn't a destroyer. It was the Eisenhower, enormous, flanked by destroyers already tracking them. The Venezuelan crew realized in an instant they hadn't trapped a ship. They challenged an entire fleet. At the center of that fleet, the Eisenhower towered like a moving mountain. To her sides, the Gravely and Mason sailed with missile cells armed and radar arrays spinning above. MH-60R Seahawks scanned the surface with infrared, radar, and visual cameras. The system labeled the Venezuelan craft as Skunk Alpha 1 through 4, unknown, fast, approaching. The American order was firm but calm. Maintain course. Do not engage unless fired upon. By 6:01 a.m., the Venezuelan radar team marked a target as Echo 2, believing it to be a lone destroyer. Their outdated plan was simple. Approach, fire warning shots, record it, send the video to Caracas for propaganda. But during the night, the U.S. fleet had shifted position. Echo 2 wasn't a destroyer. It was the Eisenhower herself. When the Venezuelan captain saw her full silhouette emerge from the morning haze, so massive it didn't look real, his entire crew went quiet. At 6:03 a.m., the Eisenhower strike group went full alert. Seahawks hovered overhead. The destroyers positioned themselves to block any direct approach. Then the moment everyone feared came. 2 short bursts fired from a Venezuelan gun, splashing harmlessly into the sea. They were intended as warning shots, nothing more. But to the Americans, they looked like hostile fire. The Gravely locked on immediately. Inside the Venezuelan boats, alarms shrieked, a missile lock warning. Panic swept through the cabins. "Cease approach! Disengage!" the commander yelled. But in the U.S. Combat Center, a different call echoed. Condition 1. Weapons release authorized for self-defense. On the Gravely's deck, the 5-inch gun elevated the Phalanx CIWS spun up, its barrels humming with lethal potential. A Seahawk hovered above, recording armed Venezuelan crew members on camera. Then came the final spark, a radar log from Equivocada 23. "Bridge, we are painted," the Seahawk pilot reported. "Copy, hold position. Do not engage unless fired upon." For 60 agonizing seconds, both sides held their breath. Engines idled. Weapons tracked. Radios stayed quiet. Then suddenly, one Venezuelan boat surged forward at high speed toward the Gravely. "Stand by countermeasures," came the order. Laser designators snapped on, painting the water like red threads. The Venezuelan captain knew exactly what that meant. 4 small boats had no chance against 2 destroyers and a carrier. At 6:06 a.m., the first Venezuelan boat broke off. Then a second. Their radar signatures began fading as they turned away. But suddenly, Equivocada 23 changed direction, looping toward the carrier's southern flank. "Contact closing fast, bearing 210, the Mason's operator called out. The destroyer shifted position, placing itself directly between the boat and the Eisenhower missile hatches, cracked open. Green flares launched, a final warning to turn away. But the patrol boat kept coming. Above, the Seahawk's microphone picked up the metallic click of a gun being cocked. Muzzle movement confirmed, the pilot relayed. The patrol boat was now just 900 yards out. Hold fire, the Gravely's captain ordered. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. Then the Venezuelan boat suddenly veered hard to port, throwing up a spray of white water. The remaining boats followed. Contacts retreating, came across the comms. Stand down weapons. Slowly, the tension dissolved. The sea fell still again. By 7 a.m., not a single Venezuelan radar return remained. The Eisenhower strike group resumed its course north, silent and steady. The confrontation had ended without a shot fired in anger, but its consequences were only beginning. Hours later, Venezuelan state television broadcast triumphant footage claiming their Navy had repelled an American intrusion. In Washington, Pentagon officials released satellite images proving the U.S. fleet had been nearly 80 miles outside Venezuelan waters. Caracas called it defense. Washington called it recklessness. The sea, as always, kept the real story behind closed doors. Diplomats on both sides scrambled to cool tempers before the situation ignited into something neither nation was prepared to face. There were no shots fired, no casualties, no broken hulls drifting in the water. Just a moment, tense, razor thin, where a misunderstanding almost dragged two countries into a conflict neither had calculated. For what looked calm on paper had been anything but calm on the decks where sailors stood gripping cold steel and waiting for an order that never came later. When the crews finally had a chance to breathe and replay the morning in their minds, many admitted how close things had come. Some said the difference between a near miss and a shooting war wasn't strategy or firepower, it was timing. A single radio call delivered half a second too late, a warning shot landing a few meters too close. One nervous finger brushing a trigger because the adrenaline didn't know where else to go. Official statements labeled the encounter routine, a harmless maritime interaction. But the men who were there, the ones sweating behind consoles and gripping gun mounts, said it was the closest they'd been to firing in decades. Out on the ocean, there is no pause button, no replay, no time out to rethink what you meant to do. Once a captain commits, once a sailor squeezes the trigger, the outcome, good or catastrophic, is locked into history. Every decision is made in real time, without certainty, without second chances, and often without full information. That's the unforgiving truth of naval encounters. So here's the question that every sailor, every officer, and every leader quietly asks themselves afterward. You're standing on the bridge. 4 fast patrol boats are racing toward you at 40 knots. Unknown intentions, unknown payloads. Your radar is locked, your weapons are manned, and every eye on your ship is waiting for your word. Do you hold your fire and risk being too late? Or do you squeeze the trigger first and risk starting a war you never meant to begin?